Hello and welcome to Ready to Thrive. I am sitting here with the lovely Molly DeFrank. Now, Molly is a mom of 6 kids. She has been a foster mom, adoptive mom, and she is the author of Digital Detox, the 2-week tech reset for kids. And as we will get going, you will hear that I am just smack in the middle of this 2-week digital detox with my family, and I am loving it. So I am so glad to be able to sit down with Molly herself. And Molly, just tell us a little bit more about yourself, and thank you for being on Ready to Thrive.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacqueline. I love sharing our story. I love helping parents. And this is actually the first podcast I've done with a host who's in the midst of their detox. So I've been really looking forward to this. So that is awesome. You said it. I'm a mom of 6, mom and foster mom. My kids range in age from 5 to 12. Right now, we'll have a 13-year-old this year. So, but we've fostered kids of all ages, up several teenagers. So we've kind of had it all.
Awesome. And I think I saw that you have recently signed adoption papers. Is that right?
Yes. So we signed papers and we're just waiting on that court date. So we're really excited. That's our number 6. He's been with us for a couple of years. But we're making it official. We're so excited. He's a great kid.
Well, I'd love to ask you, I know for a lot of moms, they have like, okay, having a baby is like, oh, that's a shift. And sometimes people are like, oh, 1 to 2 wasn't a big deal, or, whoa, 2 to 3. What has been the number for you where you've been like, okay, moving from this number to this number has felt like a shift? Or is it just that like keep adding more doesn't make a difference at this point?
I have really strong feelings about this. And I really believe 1 to 2 was the hardest transition. Okay. It was so hard. My first 2 kids are 15 months apart. And we have late walkers in our family. So I had like a crawling 15-month-old and a newborn. It was so hard. But then after that, I felt like, then we had 3 in 3 years. That was super hard. But I felt like once you're juggling, it's like if you're making 3 PB&Js, what's a 4th? If you're making 4, what's a 5th,
You're already not sleeping. Who cares?
Right. That is exactly it.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it was definitely 2 to 3. I had my first 2 kids 3 years apart. And just their personality, they worked out super well. And then 2 to 3 was like, whoa. And, I remember actually there was one season where when my kids were little, being able to get them on a screen was such a lifesaver, because I was like, oh, I can shower. I know you're safe over here. I can do something. And so I had a friend I was sharing this weekend as we're in the middle of our digital detox. And she was sharing that she hadn't had her kids watch TV all day, but then she showed me pictures. She's like, but look at this space. And her living room was such a disaster because creative kids make these giant messes. And so it can feel like, and she said to me, okay, I can either put them on a screen and get stuff done, have this clean house, or, it's going to be a disaster. And so we will talk about, I don't know if you want to hit that now or just dive into your story, but that definitely, there's a lot of challenges that I think people can hear. Oh my goodness, she has 6 kids. She's saying go on this tech reset. Let's just talk about your story and then we'll dive into some of the issues along the way.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Well, we started our detox journey about 3 years ago when I had 5 kids and I was homeschooling 2 of them. This is pre-COVID, just good old fashioned homeschool for the older ones. And I had 2 3-year-olds at home, 1 new-ish foster placement. And it was sort of insane and really scary. So you're exactly right what you were saying about it being messy. And for the short term, it seems really difficult because you can't just kind of pacify them with digital entertainment, and it is messy. But for me, I kept getting seeing these behavioral hiccups, these kind of amped up sibling fights that I'm like, this seems like off to me. And I'm the youngest of 4. So we definitely had our own sibling spats growing up, and my siblings are my best friends now. But I look at this going down and I think, gosh, it's worse. It's really bad right after screen time. And I didn't know if it was normal or was it like this when I was a kid? I don't know. And so every time we'd run into another one of these situations, I would kind of like, that that feeling of, do we make a big change and make my life really hard? Or do we just like, deal with it? And finally, one day I came home from running some errands, and one of my kids greeted me at the door with, "Can I play on your phone?" And it wasn't even like, "Hi, mommy," or a hug. And that to me, I was like, nah, man, I'm over this. So I called my husband at work and I'm like, I think we need to pull the plug. I think we have to make a big move. Like, that was so sad to me to be greeted that way. And he was all about it. And we had kind of tossed the idea around sooner, but he was like, "Look, you're the one who's home with them full time. So this is going to have to be, you're going to bear most of the burden. So if you want to do it, that's completely your decision. I'll back you up when I'm home." So we told the kids at dinner that night, and they were really not happy about it. We said, "Guys, it's not a punishment, but we're just going to take a break. We're taking a break from screens. I know it's hard," but there were a lot of tears. Of course, it was like their favorite hobbies. They loved it. And just like you said, we were on I thought, like a pretty conservative, responsible end of the spectrum. We were maybe 1 or 2 hours a day of screen time. And I would look around and be like, well, this is, compared to everyone else, this seems fine. But we were still seeing the behavioral stuff. We were still seeing the attentional stuff, and we didn't like it. So it wasn't until we finally pulled the plug altogether, because we had been doing that thing that I think most good parents do, where they take away 30 minutes here and they add 30 minutes back here for good behavior, and and you kind of adjust. But we were running into that same wall that good parents run into, which is, it's not working. We're still seeing these behaviors. We're still hearing them complain about boredom. Like, why don't they want to go play outside? That's weird. Like, I did that my whole childhood. What's going on? And it wasn't until we unplugged all of it and we had this window of time where we could look at our kids and say, whoa, that's what it was. It wasn't sugar. It wasn't lack of sleep. It was that they were being amped up. That was the thing they were looking forward to. And it wasn't until long after our detox, when I saw the changes, started telling friends about it, started taking notes on what do all of these successful detoxes have in common. And then I basically wrote, the book I wrote is the guide I wish we had when we started, because I kind of went in blind. And then did a bunch of research and talked to friends and started helping friends and then strangers. And so, yeah, it's been a really incredible experience.
Well, I love that. It's funny when you mentioned that idea of this thing that kids are looking forward to. And I've noticed that in my kids as well, where, they like to go to bed late. Some of them have often struggled to fall asleep. And so for us, we haven't really had early risers. We've had kids who have to be like, get up, it's time to go to school. And so then on the weekend, like Saturday, I'm like, guys, you get to sleep in. This is so great. But then I'll get up and I'm like, you guys got up so early to go have your Saturday morning TV. And similar to you, I would say we limit screens. Like, we haven't had, our kids don't own a screen. We have like a family iPad. Our TV is actually in our basement. So a few years ago, we got our main floor painted, and we moved our TV from like the focal point downstairs. So that really cut down on things. So I'm like, we're doing great things. Like, that's in my mind. I'm like,
yeah,
this is what we're doing. Our video game system is from the 90s. Like,
yes.
And my oldest was like, Mom, like, she's like, the best part about our video games is that like, you can't get addicted because they're so lame. so it's like, I'm like, okay, we're doing all these things like, well, yet I still have felt like for all of us, there's been that inability to choose really what I'd say is something life-giving. We're just kind of choosing what's easy. And so for the kids, it would be like, okay, we're choosing, can I watch a show? And I'm like, you know what? I'm making dinner. Sure. 30 minutes here. You can watch this one show. That makes my life easy. This is so great. And so getting into some of those things. So again, with the Saturday morning, okay, you can watch a bit of TV. Well, you know what? The house is so nice and quiet. We're just going to, you can watch a little more, right? Like, it's those kind of things we were getting into. And so we just came off 2 weeks of spring break. Our weather here has been terrible. So we weren't getting outside as much as I would have liked. And there was definitely more screens. So we sat down with our kids and I just said, kind of like, I love when we have those decision moments that you're like, this is what we're doing. I said, hey guys, tomorrow we're going to start a 2-week spring break. And a 2-week screen break. They weren't actually upset. And there's been very little pushback. The odd time, oh, I wish I could, play this game or do this thing. But for the most part, I think they've really, really enjoyed it. Pushing past, there's actually been some naps happening in the afternoon, realizing, okay, maybe I'm listening to my body. I am tired. So I'm going to rest here. Lots of reading, lots of imaginative play. Like there was a few times on the weekend where I was upstairs and it was eerily quiet. And that point where you're like, as a mom, you're worried. Like you're just like,
yes,
what is happening?
Yep.
And so one time I came down and everybody was reading. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like and my husband had come back, he'd taken them to the library. But another time, so that was maybe on Sunday, on Saturday, I came home. I'd been out getting a few things. I came home. And again, I was like, what is happening? Eerily quiet. All three girls were in the basement playing together, which is not unusual, but the amount of together play they had this weekend, they ended up having a sleepover together Saturday night. And I also want to say this because we have been having some behavioral issues with one of my kids. And because of those issues, it has been causing a bit of a division in our family. And so we've been trying lots of things to figure out, like, we want to be closely connected as a family. We're doing these things. And yet taking these screens away has really helped them connect as the three of them. Because when you get annoyed with a sibling, it's hard to you just kind of are like, you're in my space. I don't want anything to do with you. Seeing that shift this weekend was like, okay, we could just get rid of all screens forever. So I know that was a lot, but that's kind of where we're at. I really appreciate it. And you shared a bit of your story. So take me back to that. How were the first few weeks? You kind of said how long did you set up in your mind to go for?
So at the beginning, between my husband and I think we started in like mid-February, and we looked at the calendar and I'm like, let's just go to the end of February. So the plan was 2 weeks, but as we got to the end of the 2 weeks, we had never had such consistently connective times as a family as we did in these 2 weeks. So we were like, why would we go back? Why'd we dial it back? And our kids were young enough. And this is what I recommend to parents is if your kids are younger, so like 10 and under, and you can leave the time frame open-ended, I recommend that parents do that, because you may, and a lot of parents do, get to the end of those 2 weeks and go, why are we going to undo all of this great progress? So once we got there, between my husband and I were like, let's just keep going. The kids didn't know that we had an end date for this thing. So we went on and on for months. And then towards the end of that, my husband and I huddled again and we're like, we do like digital entertainment and we think there can be a place for it. It can be really fun. We happen to enjoy Lord of the Rings and Marvel movies and all of these things with our kids. So we made a long-term plan that was sustainable, that kept our results. That's actually what the second half of the book is about. So the first half is walking parents through the detox, and the second half is a sustainable long-term plan, because most families don't want to eliminate all technology forever. They just have gotten to a place, especially in the wake of COVID, where they're like, so much has seeped in that it's like little by little, another device, another 10 minutes, another hour. And it's filled, this digital entertainment has filled up all of those sweet places that usually, like during my childhood and yours, that's how we connected with our parents. It's the boring parts of the day. That's how we connected with our siblings. And as you're seeing in your own detox, and we saw in ours too, it's like, we're giving our kids and our family, we're bringing that back. And we found it to be really sweet. At the beginning of our detox, we actually saw results pretty much overnight. And I was not expecting that. I planned for the worst. It was one of those things where you tell your kids, we're done. That's it. We've decided. And they freak out. And you're like the calm adult in the room, like, nope, this is what we're doing. But on the inside, you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I'm going to die. But the next morning we had told the kids, we're like, don't even ask for a screen. It's not negotiable. And if it's off the table. So don't even ask. And so, because they knew that, they just started playing with their Legos and making forts and all of these other things. And it definitely made messes, to go back to that point. And it did require sometimes, especially for the littlest kids, us to kind of go in and give them like nudges sometimes when they would, if they're not used to having these skills of like boredom negotiation, where they hit a wall of like, well, now what do I do? They have everything they need in their minds, and our kids are all wired uniquely. So some of them wanted to go paint, some of them wanted to cook in the kitchen, some of them wanted to go outside and look at flowers or whatever it was. And kind of like observing your kids, which is a critical part of the detox, is kind of meeting them where they're at and then kind of nudging them and opening their eyes to what's in front of them. So we found a lot of that. The families I've helped through their own detoxes have found either it's immediate or a couple days, or within a week, their kids finally, they see a click. One mom likened it to that like 3-day potty training. She said the first couple days were real rough, but then something happens and it clicks and they get it. So the other point I wanted to make about the messes you were talking about, 100% there are going to be messes, 100%. But that's a skill that our kids need to learn. They need to learn. I'm explaining this to my kids all the time. You need to be a good roommate. Like if you're going to grow up, you're going to move out, you're going to go to college. Like people don't want to hang out with someone or live with them if you're not a good citizen in your apartment. Like these are habits that we need to build. And so you're practicing those. So you do one thing at a time. And anyway, so these are things, it looks difficult, but trying to focus not on what is seen, but what is unseen, to apply that in a different context.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, I love even just that secondary skill that can be learned there, which is the skill of not being overwhelmed by a mess, but beginning to tackle it and clean up. And again, sometimes when my kids make these massive disasters, it's like, what does it look like to clean it up together and kind of go in and help them where I can? And that's a point of connection. But also I have found now my kids are very good at cleaning up their own creations. They're still, sometimes they need some prompting, but it's a skill. Like it is just that with the first time you do it, you have that sense of like, oh, this is so overwhelming. Okay. So then you learn, all right, I've done this thing. I can now kind of clean it up. I love what you're sharing, especially for, like you said, parents of kids under 10. What would you say, right? Because there's so much we can do right now. What would you say to the parent who's listening, who's like, great, but my kids are teenagers. They have their own phone. It's not working. I don't like it. I don't know what to do with them. What would you say to those parents?
That's a great question. And the book itself is geared probably to parents more like 0 to 12 or 13. However, the principles can really be applied to anyone. The last chapter is about parents and their use of technology. But speaking to parents of older kids, as the role of parent changes as our kids grow older, at the beginning, it's kind of that like commander, pure authority, like don't run into the street, don't drink the Windex. They kind of have to do what we say. And it transitions as they get older to kind of more mentor, coach, that kind of thing. And while we still have that authority role in their lives, it is sort of tapering off as they plan to fly the coop at 18. So, bearing that in mind, it is a little different for our teenagers because they have more autonomy, and that's good. They should. But I really recommend bearing that in mind, that parents of tweens and teenagers, especially if they have their own phone, that parents get a little more skin in the game because of their mentor role in their kids' lives. So for example, and imagine it more like you're recruiting someone to do a Whole30 with you, with those older kids. It's like, guys, I've been reading about what, the impact of screens is having on kids and especially teenagers. And I actually really wanted to pick your brain about this. Like, have you ever noticed that your friends are depressed or anxious? Or have you ever noticed that your friends sometimes like ignore you when you're around them because they're staring at their device? Or have you ever seen me do that to you? I want to be more aware of this. Like, have you noticed that? I feel terrible. Like, I want to stop that. And it's such addictive technology, just kind of owning, like having some humility about it. We're all human people. We're all battling this attentional, vacuum that we're holding in our hands. And so kind of approaching it with humility and getting some skin in the game. So if you're willing to say to your teenagers, like, gosh, I want to do this 2-week challenge where we kind of detox. And I know that your phone is a huge part of your life now. It's less for your small siblings, but for you, that's how you socialize with your friends. So we want you to be able to have that, but pick an aspect of it to kind of help refresh our brains. So here's what I was thinking. Would you guys be down for 2 weeks, no social media, no gaming, like a challenge? We'll do it as a family. And what do you think about that? I think we might really like it. Would you be willing to try it? We can ask some of your friends if they want to do it at the same time. So it's definitely going to be more of a recruiting someone, like a beckoning than a commanding. Yeah, definitely get some skin in the game. So that's what I recommend for older kids.
Well, I love that. And even as you were sharing your response, I was remembering, so we haven't had, my husband works for an organization called Young Life. And every summer we are at camp. And we haven't had camp the last few summers, but we will this summer. And one of the things that happens is all the kids put their phones in the safe in the room. They lock them up for the week. And so at first here's the funny thing. It's hard on the kids at first. It's actually hard on the parents. And so if I know the parents, they'd often be texting me, how's my kid doing? What's going on? And I mean, it makes sense. But one of the common responses from teenagers after their week at camp, they get their phones back on the bus, is some of them have said, I don't want it back. Like, can you hold on to it for me until I get home? Because they have had that week-long detox. They sit around the table at every meal, sometimes with their leader and their friends, sometimes with other people, and they're experiencing awkward silence. They're experiencing eye contact. There's all these things, but I think part of what I've heard you share about as well is this idea of a dopamine reset. And so my hope is that parents of teens would feel encouraged, that it's not too late, and that your teen might actually want to do something like that. Yes, it might take, I think what Molly was saying was that humility might take some creativity, but also even I've said to my kids, when they've said, Mom, when do we get a phone? I've been like, Mom needs to get a hold of her own phone usage before you get one. Like, we need to, this has been a problem here. And so we have a pretty open dialogue about my phone usage and what we want for screen. So I think being able to have that and really create that open dialogue with your teens. I'm also a high school teacher. And so it breaks my heart seeing kids on their phones all day long in the halls, in the school. It is, there's definitely something that is happening in their brain, but can be changed. So tell me about neuroplasticity and tell me about dopamine.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And this is stuff that I kind of had understood a piece of it just through like foster parenting and training. But after we detoxed our kids, and then I started writing about it, and then I started reading, tons and tons of books about it, seeing, wow, the science supports this. And learning that, gosh, the engineers who create our kids' apps and games, they have learned so much about the way the brain works and about how dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter, is released whenever we experience anything pleasurable. So, you're going for a walk, you're hugging your loved one, tasting something delicious, dopamine is released. Well, what they've done is they've taken what they know about that and they've baked dopamine release points into these apps and games. So we've got the best and the brightest using this technology and what we know about human psychology, and they're putting it in your kids' devices. And then we're buying the devices and giving it to our kids for Christmas. And what shot does a kid have against, these tons of brilliant engineers monetizing your kids' attention? So it really does it requires us to kind of roll up our sleeves and make decisions to put those friction points in for our kids, because what we're seeing a lot of the times too is, especially through the course of the pandemic, kids' screen time has doubled. 12-year-olds are spending 8 hours a day on digital entertainment. So that's not even including time spent for school or homework. It's just entertainment. And so their brains are being continually bathed in dopamine. And when you take it away, initially, what you're seeing, and when the kids are in a bad mood or they're ornery or grumpy, you're seeing a dopamine crash in real time. So that's why kids kind of lose it after screen time. So when you detox your kids, when you're pulling the plug for 2 weeks, you are bringing their dopamine levels back down to normal real life. So you're giving them a chance to rekindle a love of going for a run, of playing a board game with mom and dad, all these things that they would complain are boring if daily screen time is an option. And truly, like, the brain science is showing us that, yeah, it is boring compared to that, because it's not releasing the same amount of dopamines. Science has shown us that dopamine receptors are actually going numb because there's so much dopamine getting released that it's like any addictive pull. Now you need more in order to experience the same amount of pleasure that you once had from less dopamine. So this is what's happening inside our kids' brains. But you said something earlier about having hope. And that's what I hope that parents hear, is that there is a way out. And because, like you mentioned, of neuroplasticity, because our brains are able to be rewired, there is hope and there is a way out. And honestly, the change and the switch is simple. It is so simple. And that's what I think is the most life-giving, hopeful thing about it. Just like you said, you lock those kids' phones in this box for a week and they come out of that addictive pull, and they're feeling better and they're happier. We've experienced the same thing with foster teens we've had in our home. They've come back and told me, like, I surprised myself. Usually I'd go in my room and sit on my phone, but I liked being there with you guys. And I'm sitting there looking at my husband, like, we made peanut butter and banana sandwiches and went for a walk. This isn't like rocket science. This is a very simple, time-old connective tools that we have at our disposal. And unfortunately, we're not using them because our kids are, they're pushing back on us when we try and take it away, but they need us to do that. They need us to be the parent to get that clarity, and not to remove it forever, but to make a long-term plan where technology is working for you and not the other way around.
Yeah, so good. My husband has done a great job of his own phone habits. So years ago, he would be on his phone all the time for work. So really being available all hours. And he made a decision where it took him a little while to kind of train people he was working with that he would be off. But Friday night, he powers off his phone. We bought a home phone maybe 2 summers ago, so that if I'm out, I can, Molly just picked up the world's largest, is that that's so distracting. Is that a water bottle?
I'm so sorry. It is so big.
Is it as big as your head?
It is huge. I ordered it on Sam's Club and it didn't look this big. I actually bought a twin pack. One of them's black and I gave one to my husband. He's like, I'm not carrying that around.
How many ounces is that?
I don't even know, but it really does hydrate me.
Oh,
it doesn't say.
That was so funny.
Sorry.
At first I thought it was an optical illusion. I was like, I think that I can't not say something. The world's largest water bottle. You can get it at Sam's Club. Anyway, so we got a home phone. So if I'm out, because again, anytime you are adjusting, you need solutions. So for things like music, okay, if we're not on our phone, like, how do we find those solutions? So we got a home phone, so I can call him when I'm out, and he has his phone off. So Friday night, powers his phone off. Generally speaking, it doesn't get powered on until Sunday after church, maybe in the morning. But it was like, whoa, and that's scary to actually turn your phone off, because you have that feeling of like, I need to be reached, was definitely scary. But that was something, it was like, no, you are modeling this to our kids. You were doing this for your own mental health, for all of these reasons. And so I think I've even noticed I've been doing some of my own tech reset. And one of my personal goals is really to not have my phone around my kids at all, not have them see my phone. Now they will, I will still have, text somebody or call somebody. There's things that we need our phones for. And so I'm on that journey of what does it look like to live with technology, have it work for me. And so I would just love, as kind of we close here, what are things you have found have worked for your kids, for your family, to reintroduce technology, and what are some of
Mhm.
those kind of boundaries you've put around technology?
That's so good. And that's the question. And the beauty of it is that no one knows kids like their parents. You know your kids best. So when I have helped people through their detoxes, and as families create their long-term plans, they're going to look a little different in every family. And that's beautiful because parents know their kids well and they know what they need. And they know that some kids struggle with even a little bit. It's going to take them out of whack. And some kids can do well with more. So it's definitely a beautiful thing to individually tailor your plan for your kids. For us, I read a lot of books throughout this process. One of the ones that I really loved was the Andy Crouch book, The Tech Wise Family. And he talks a lot about putting technology in its proper place, I think is the subhead. So really trying to develop a posture of putting the screen time in its right place and what that looks like for each family. And for us, where we've landed is we want to use technology to connect with each other, and we like to use it to create. But when it comes to isolating and consuming, we don't really want to do that. So our long-term plan right now for us, it looks like sometime we don't do weekday screen time for the most part, with the exception of at the end of the night, we eat family dinner and then we do dishes together. Sometimes we'll watch a family show together, like Guys Grocery Games or something like that. Or sometimes we'll do like a read aloud. So we kind of mix it up, whatever we feel like, but we're doing that together. And then my big kids, my big three, will get an hour of an approved video game once a week. So on the weekend, and that we don't let them do that on weekdays. And that's been working great in our family. So we're going to have to continuously reassess this as the kids get older. But the good news is that we have, and for, parents like you and me, our kids are at this age where, and I'm thankful because the iPhone came out in 2007 and the iPad came out in 2011. And so for the last decade, there's almost been like this giant experiment on our kids. And a lot of parents have bought into the marketing of, well, in order to get ahead, we need to give my kids this technology sooner. That's how they get ahead. And we bought into that marketing, and me included. Like I gave my kids tablets when they were little. But we've had this decade to look back and say, well, how is that working out? And you see mental health crisis among kids, and you see anxiety, and these doctors are looking back and they're researching it, and they're just scraping the surface, but they're attributing a lot of this to kids having too much technology and the opportunity cost. So anyway, sorry, can you tell I could talk about this all day long?
Well, and I actually wanted to ask you as well about the TikTok ticks.
Yes. Oh yeah, there was a Wall Street Journal article. I think it was last week. There's a really great reporter at the Wall Street Journal who's doing an excellent job covering family and technology, and they've uncovered these things that are going on where let's see, ER visits for tic disorders tripled over the course of the pandemic, and that's for, I think they studied 12 to 17-year-old girls. And they were like, what is going on? These doctors are looking at this, like why it looks like Tourette syndrome. And they looked closer, they studied it, and they said, this is not Tourette syndrome. It's actually like a neurological situation that they have attributed to underlying mental health problems and TikTok exposure to these videos. So same thing with eating disorders. ER visits for eating disorders doubled over the course of the pandemic for 12 to 17-year-olds. And doctors, again, are looking at this going, okay, it's these kids have a mental health problem that's underlying, and it's exposure to this on TikTok. And so we've taken our kids in their most formative years, and they're put in a place where it is impossible to find, this is when they need unconditional love the most. And they are put in this world of social media where it's conditional likes, and they need their parents more than ever because they're focused on this outward projection and getting likes from people. And what they really need is to know that they're fully known and fully loved just as they are. And their parents can show that to them in their home. But if we're not careful, we will willingly just relinquish these opportunities to show our kids that they're known and loved, and we'll hand it over to a place where it's actually just really harmful for them. So getting back to the hope aspect though, it can be turned around. And we do see that relationship is the key to all of this. So digging in with your kids there. I don't know if you read Sally Clarkson and Clay Clarkson. They're such encouraging parents, but they had this observation. It said that that parents have the most influence on their kids between this like golden decade of ages 4 to 14. And it's when kids are naturally wired to just look for their parents' approval, and you know, they still think you're cool and all of that. So I'm soaking that in because all 6 of my kids are in that window right now. So I'm like, oh man, I want to make the best of it. But you know, wanting to just really use that to look in our kids, increase the eye contact, increase those connective moments in the car. Don't waste those times, because the majority of our relationships with our kids, they're going to be adults and we're going to be adults. And there's so much time for that like mutual stuff later. But for now, they really need us to kind of get back in the driver's seat and look at the long view and make the decisions that they need us to make.
Yeah, so good. Friday after school, my oldest came home, and she's going to be 11 this summer. And she was like, what are we going to do? Like, and I had this, because I knew the weekend would be the most impactful for my kids, because the weekend is like Friday night movie night. Sometimes it's like, sure, you can play Minecraft before then. And and she said, there's nothing I can do. Well, there is something, but you'll probably say no. Like, okay, well, we could go shopping. So her latest thing is she's into shopping. I'm like, so well, cute. Like we could go do that. So the 2 of us went out and we tried on clothes, and we just like had this, like, it was really like this sisterly friendship kind of fun night where she's getting to that point of we can kind of laugh and even just discuss, how do you know if you should buy something or walk away, and how to talk about it. And so it was this fun night. And she said to me, yeah, well, there's no point in rushing home because we don't have a movie to get home to or anything. Like, we might as well just kind of keep connecting. And it was such a sweet time of connection. And yeah, we've gone shopping before together, and but there is something different. And so I think the 2 encouragements I'd want to leave with parents are, you may be doing a lot of great things, like I feel like we have been, but I think if you're feeling that nudge of, we just maybe need a bit of a break, and we need a chance to look at how we want to re-enter. How do we want to use technology instead of feeling like it's kind of has that grip on us? And then for the mom listening who feels like it's too late, I've screwed up, I'm feeling a sense of shame, I just want to release you from that and just say, this is a fresh start. This is a chance to say, we are going to do some things differently. And I've shared lots on my podcast here about us being in debt and other things my husband and I have talked about, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you have been going through. This is a chance to do a reset, start something new, and you will be so glad that you did.
I love that you said that. And I would just echo that if you are feeling the nudge that you want to make a change, but you feel overwhelmed that it's going to be too hard, I would just encourage you that you can absolutely do it. You can do it. All kinds of families have done it. Homeschool families, single moms, and we're walking with one right now who's going through it. Absolutely, there are unique challenges there. If you have an only child, you can do it. If you have a teen and a little one, you can do it. And no one is in a better position than you as the mom or the dad to take that step, because you know your kid better than anyone else. And I'd love to help you through that. And you can find me on Instagram or on my website, mollydefrank.com. And the book I wrote, Digital Detox, it's the guide I wish I had when we started, because I felt a little bit like I was off-roading. And so I want to give parents the hope and encouragement that they need. Plus, there's some facts in there. I know what I found when I was reading a lot of these books was that there's so much data to support detoxing. There's so much data telling us that kids are suffering from too much digital entertainment, but parents already know that because we see it in the home already. What parents want to know is, how do we fix it? And so that's the guide that I wrote, is here's how to walk through it. And please know too that this is coming from a place of humility. We were all about the tablets, handing over the phone at the doctor's office, all of that with my kids when they were younger. And it was one of those things where know better, do better. And we made a course correction. And not just because I feel like it's better for their brains, but because we get to enjoy each other more. So waiting on the other side for you is an enjoyment of your kids that I think some families say is lacking. And I'm just excited for you to move forward. And
so good. Well, one of my favorite things that you said today was we're going to connect instead of consume. And so I know that will be the case for you as you go through Molly's book, Digital Detox, the 2-week tech reset for kids. Molly's book is actually not out yet. It comes out April 19th, but please pre-order. Pre-order is actually a really big deal. You get some free gifts when you pre-order. It also just lets stores know like, oh, a lot of people are interested in this. We're going to actually put more in our stores. So pre-ordering is great. Amazon always gives you the best deal. They will charge you the lowest price between now and when it comes out. Plus you get it right away. So pre-order the book and then leave a 5-star review for Molly on Amazon. That's also really key. So those are huge things you can do for Molly, and even just buy it for your friends. Go through this with your friends, and then you guys can talk about it and go through this digital detox. So you know how to find Molly's book on Amazon, and where can people find you?
Yes, I'm on, my website is mollydefrank.com, or you can find me on Instagram, Molly DeFrank, DeFrank. I've started posting some of my reels to TikTok in case parents there want some help. It sounds like parents all over the place are needing help. So you can find me any of those places. I'd love to hear from you. Jacqueline, I love watching your glimpses of your own kids' detoxes. So if you're detoxing your kids, if you're on Instagram and you're sharing something about that, tag me. I love hearing people's stories. So, yep.
So good. Well, thank you, Molly. This has been awesome. And I trust this has helped you move one step closer to thriving.
Thanks, Jacqueline.